There are people who reach old age standing on their own 2 feet, and people who simply wait to be carried. The difference has nothing to do with luck. I'm 87 years old. My name is Catherine. When Harold passed, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Everyone had advice. Move in with your grandchildren. Sell the house. A woman your age can't be expected to manage alone. And yet, here I am. Not because my family rescued me, not because the universe decided to be kind. I'm still standing because, decades ago, I started building the only 5 things that actually hold you up when everything else falls away. Nobody warned me about this. Nobody sat me down and said, Catherine, if you want to stay free, if you want to stay yourself, this is what you need to build. I had to figure it out by watching the people around me either shrink into dependence or hold their ground until the very end. The first thing is your physical ability to keep moving, not running marathons, not training like an athlete, just moving deliberately every single day. I came to understand this in a brutal way when I was 72. I woke up one Tuesday and couldn't stand up without grabbing the door frame. My hips felt cemented. My ankles were swollen. I sat there on the edge of the mattress, breathing through the pain, and I thought, so this is how it begins. And then I thought of a woman named Doris who had lived 3 doors down from me. She was 68 when her knees gave out. She didn't think much of it at first, just sat down more often. But sitting became her whole life. 18 months later, she was living in a spare room at her son's house. She hadn't lost her sharpness. She hadn't lost her mind. She had lost her mobility, and with it, her choices. When you can no longer carry your own body from room to room, you can no longer carry your own decisions either. That morning, sitting on the edge of my mattress, I made a vow. I would move every single day, no matter what. I began with nothing dramatic. 20 minutes of slow walking through the neighborhood, gentle rotations at the ankles and wrists, slow knee lifts while seated in the kitchen chair. No effort to impress anyone, just consistency. Because I understood by then what was really at stake. Today, at 87, I dress myself. I walk to the pharmacy. I carry my own bags home. And that means I never have to wait for someone else's schedule. I never have to ask permission to go somewhere. My neighbor Rosemary stopped moving at 74, convinced that rest would protect her. But rest accelerated the decay. Today she needs a walker to reach her front door, and she cannot enter or leave her own home without another person standing beside her. Her prison has no bars. It's built entirely out of the stillness she chose. Do not let that happen to you. Your body is the foundation of every other freedom you have. Protect it like a fortress because it is one. The second thing is learning to need less. Not as a punishment, not as poverty, as a strategy. For most of my life, I believed that security meant accumulation. More money put away, more property, more comfort surrounding me. I believed that having more things would insulate me from the fragility of old age. I was completely wrong. Real security is not about how much you have. It's about how little you require. I understood this at 69, about 18 months after Harold died. I was sitting at the kitchen table late at night, going through the bills for a house that had 4 bedrooms and 2 floors and a garden that needed constant attention. And I asked myself a hard question. Who is this for? I thought of a man named Gerald on the next block who had worked 40 years without ever touching his retirement savings, who had built a life that looked magnificent from the outside and was quietly destroying him from the inside. By his late 70s, the costs had outpaced his income. His pension couldn't keep up. He started borrowing money from his daughter, quietly at first, then with increasing frequency. I watched him diminish every time he had to make that call. I sold the house. I bought a smaller place on a single floor, paid for outright, low maintenance, easy to heat. I gave away the second car. I stopped eating at restaurants 6 nights a week. I stopped purchasing objects just because I'd grown accustomed to purchasing objects. And something unexpected happened. I felt wealthier. Not because my bank balance had grown, but because my obligations had shrunk. When you don't need much, no one has leverage over you. You don't owe anyone gratitude for their financial rescue. You don't have to soften your opinions to keep the peace with someone who helps pay your bills. I have a dear friend named Patricia who is 84 and still rattling around in a 6-bedroom house she cannot afford to maintain. She refuses to downsize because she worries what the neighbors will say. So she scrapes by. She asks her children for money and pretends it doesn't cost her anything. On paper, she owns more than I do. In practice, she is far less free. The third thing is your health. Not the health you were born with, but the health you construct through your daily habits. I want to be blunt about this because I've seen too many people my age suffer consequences that were entirely preventable. Your body doesn't negotiate with you after a certain point. You either maintain it or it begins the long process of collecting its debts. My older brother Victor ignored every signal his body sent him for 30 years. He ate whatever required the least effort to prepare. He smoked until his mid-60s. He went to the doctor only when something had already gone seriously wrong. When he was 73, the bill arrived. Severe diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and blood pressure that required 3 separate medications just to keep him out of immediate danger. He didn't die, but in many meaningful ways, he stopped living. He became the full-time administrator of his own medical deterioration, coordinating prescriptions, attending specialist appointments twice a week, structuring every meal around a list of forbidden ingredients. That was the rest of his life, managing the consequences of a few decades of indifference. I took a different path. At 67, I changed the conditions I was operating in. I began walking before breakfast every morning. I started cooking real food from actual ingredients. I drank water. I slept properly. And I went to the doctor every single year, regardless of whether I felt sick, because I understood that prevention is not the same thing as treatment, and that catching a problem early is the difference between a minor inconvenience and a years-long ordeal. Now, at 87, I take no daily medications. My cardiovascular markers are good. My physician tells me my body operates closer to that of someone 15 years younger. I'm not exceptional. I'm not genetically blessed. I simply made consistent small decisions over a very long period of time, and those decisions compounded. The freedom I have now, the freedom to manage my own health, to not need someone to remind me to take pills or drive me to appointments 3 times a week, is the direct return on that investment. Earn your health every single day, or spend your final years paying the interest on neglect. The fourth thing is the capacity to survive loss without being destroyed by it. This is the one no one wants to discuss. But after the age of 60, loss is not an occasional visitor. It moves in. It brings its luggage. The people you built your life around will begin to leave, through death, through distance, through the ordinary erosion of time. The question that will define your final decades is not whether you will face devastating loss. You will. The question is, can you keep living after it without needing other people to carry the weight of your grief for you? When Harold died, I was 68. We had been together for 46 years. In the weeks afterward, I felt like I was missing an organ. Some essential part of myself had simply been removed. I could see very clearly the 2 paths available to me. I could dissolve. I could let the grief become my whole identity. Sit by the phone, waiting for my children to call. Build my days entirely around the question of who would come to fill the silence. Or I could grieve, genuinely, deeply, and still keep walking. I chose to keep walking. I cried when I needed to cry. I missed him out loud to myself and to the people who loved him too. But I did not make my emptiness into someone else's obligation. I maintained my routines. I kept showing up, and slowly, carefully, I built something new around the space he had left. Not better, not the same, just different. A friend of mine, Beatrice, lost her husband around the same time. She stopped going to the things she used to love. She stopped calling friends. She moved into a kind of suspended waiting, as if she were holding her breath until someone came to restore what had been taken from her. Her children tried. They visited constantly. They called every day, but they couldn't fix it because grief isn't something that gets fixed by other people's presence. It gets metabolized by your own willingness to keep moving through it. Beatrice is now 82 and still suspended, still waiting, quietly furious that no one has managed to make her whole again. I loved Harold completely, but I did not believe that my survival was his children's responsibility. Resilience is not about being impervious to pain. It is about being willing to stand up again after the pain has knocked you flat, and then to do it again the next time, and the time after that. Without that willingness, you will spend the rest of your life dependent on others to lift you off the floor. The fifth thing is the clearest knowledge of who you are and an absolute refusal to hand that over. This is perhaps the most invisible danger of aging because it doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, dressed as concern. After a certain age, the people who love you most will begin to make decisions on your behalf, slowly at first, then with increasing confidence. Your adult children will decide what's safe. Your doctors will speak about you as if you are merely a body in a chair rather than a person with a perspective. Society will lower its expectations of you without telling you it's doing so. And if you are not deeply certain of who you are and what you require and what you absolutely will not accept, you will simply go along with it. I watched this happen to a woman named Louise. 69, sharp as a tack, entirely capable. Her family started by insisting she give up her car. Then they persuaded her to move to a smaller town to be closer to them. Then they steered her away from activities they considered too physically ambitious. By 79, Louise was living a life designed entirely around her family's anxiety rather than her own desires. She had been managed into a smaller existence, one thoughtful restriction at a time, and the resentment of it was slowly consuming her from the inside. When my daughter suggested I might want to consider an assisted living arrangement, just as a precaution, just to be sensible, I declined. Not with hostility, not with drama. I said, I hear your concern. and I understand it comes from love. But while I am capable of running my own life, I intend to continue doing so. If that changes, we'll have that conversation, but we are not there yet. She pushed back. She appealed to worry and to guilt. She came at me from several directions over several weeks, but I knew exactly who I was and what I was not prepared to surrender. I am now 87, living in my own home, making my own choices, eating what I choose to eat and sleeping when I choose to sleep, and spending my days according to my own sense of what matters, not out of stubbornness, out of self-knowledge. If you do not know yourself clearly, your values, your non-negotiables, the things you would rather fight for than relinquish, others will fill that space with their own preferences, and you will spend your remaining years living someone else's version of what your life should look like. So there they are, the 5 things: your physical mobility, your capacity to need less, your health tended daily, your resilience in the face of loss, and your knowledge of yourself held firmly. No one can build these for you. No one can preserve them on your behalf. Your family may love you without limit, and that love will not be enough, not without these. And if you are 60 or 70 or even 80, it is not too late to begin, but you cannot delay. Start moving your body today, not next week. Start simplifying what you need. Start taking your health seriously as a daily practice. Start sitting with your own pain instead of delegating it. Start knowing what you stand for. I can tell you with absolute certainty that in 20 years you will not regret the discipline. You will only ever regret the waiting. If something in what I've said landed in you, leave me a comment below. I read every single one, and they matter more than you might think. And if you want to go further with this conversation, there is another video waiting for you right now about the 3 things no one tells you before you live alone for the first time. The uncomfortable truths I had to learn on my own, and how I came through them without losing myself. Click it now. And if you want to keep sitting with me, subscribe. I'll be here.